Great. Hello, everyone. I see some more folks joining, so I'll give folks another minute or two to join, and then we're going to get started. Welcome, welcome. There's another couple people joining, so we're going to admit them into the meeting and then great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. People will likely continue to stream in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with just a welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here today, as well as some housekeeping. So this is the Peace Development Fund's 2020 Community Organizing Grantee Town Hall. It's a chance for us to hear from the grantees from earlier this year in our community organizing grants docket. So the housekeeping items, for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, although increasingly there are fewer and fewer of us who aren't familiar with it, we do have all of folks on mute as they are entering. And please stay on mute as during the event so that we can hear the speakers. There will be an opportunity for question and answer. We're going to do question and answer through the chat function. So you'll find the chat at the bottom of your screen in that little ribbon at the bottom. It just says chat. We are also recording and streaming live on YouTube right now. So if you don't want your beautiful face on YouTube, then go ahead and feel free to turn off your video. But you are welcome to leave it on as well. Our panelists, I'm sure, would love to see your nodding and smiling faces as they are talking. Helps it feel like we're actually in a room together. So if you would put into the chat just an introduction of yourself, if you could put your name, where you hail from, be that the name of your town or the name of your neighborhood, or some way to identify where you're at in this given moment. And then any organization that you may be a part of, or just what brought you here today. Thank you, Brennan. Brennan has shown folks how you might do it. And thank you, Marguerite Edelman in Vermont with WILF, wonderful. Alex from Holyoke with Palante, welcome, welcome. So as folks start to introduce themselves, I will try and read your names as well. And then I'm going to introduce myself. Flip Rosenberry from Amherst, longtime supporter of PDF. Thank you so much for that support and for everyone for being here today. Welcome, welcome. So my name is Emily Seraphy Cox. I'm a foundation officer at Peace Development Fund. Previous to joining the staff at Peace Development Fund, I was a community organizer for 15 years, both in Minneapolis and in San Diego. I have been involved in everything from student organizing to political campaigns for office to grassroots community organizing, moms and grandmas organizing for transportation justice or better food for their kids at school, or working with folks without homes to advocate for more affordable housing. It's a little smattering of some of the things that I've worked on. So with joining a Peace Development Fund, one of the reasons why I was drawn to work for this particular organization was because of its focus on community organizing, on investing in the sort of work that I had spent my entire career doing, and that was really exciting to me to see an organization that really believed in investing in the grassroots from the bottom up. Hello, Aine Thompson. From Out in the Open in Brattleboro, Vermont. Good showing from Vermont today. And Paul Heibel, Executive Director at PDF. Paul, can you wave? There's Paul. Welcome, Paul. Rose from Springfield, also from Peace Development Fund. Welcome, Rose. So I'm joined by some of my colleagues. And I will introduce a couple of my other colleagues a little bit later, as they will have roles in our event today. So I'll introduce a little bit about Peace Development Fund as well. Oh, and we have Angelina and Hannah from Amherst College. Wonderful, welcome. Good representation from our local community here in the Pioneer Valley. So for those of you who may not be connected to Peace Development Fund, PDF is more than a grant maker. Our model of philanthropy involves direct funding to organizations, as well as partnerships built around mutual respect and sharing resources, a transparency of planning and decision making, as well as capacity building, investing in organizations by helping them become stronger organizations. We endeavor to be a key go-to foundation on issues of peace and human rights, social justice, environmental protection, issues around kind of all of the justice issues that you might imagine that fall under that social justice umbrella. And so related to that, we work to counterbalance dominant power structures by moving resources and sharing decision-making with activist groups and communities. So that's part of what we're here to do today. So the community organizing grants, which is what each of our panelists received a community organizing grant this year. It's our flagship program here at PDF, I guess I would say. And each year, PDF receives hundreds of proposals from grassroots community organizations seeking funding. This is a very, very competitive grant process. So last year, we received over 200 applications, and we gave out 23 grants. Through a careful review and interview process, we actually interview organizations on the phone, which to me, at least, to my knowledge, makes this grant process stand out from others that I have participated in. And that helps PDF select organizations that are going to have a significant impact in their geographic and social justice focus areas. And or if they're working on issues that are not yet recognized by larger progressive funders. So the 4 key pillars that we have for our funding priorities are organizing to shift power, working to build a movement, dismantling oppression, and creating new structures. And because we have a focus on small organizations and oftentimes new organizations, we are also often the first funder for a lot of organizations. So that's a little bit about who PDF is and what the community organizing grants are. So this event that we are hosting today, the Community Organizing Grantee Town Hall, is a part of I guess what I would call a mini series of town hall events to offer an opportunity for people in PDF's network to learn directly from several of our community organizing grantees about what kind of work is happening right now on the front lines of communities across the country, and specifically in their communities. We know that no matter who is in the White House, historically marginalized communities will continue their struggle for liberation and self-determination. So we want to have continued that conversation. We envision that these events will be a chance to learn about organizing strategies on a range of issues, hear what some of the on-the-ground challenges are facing movements today, and an opportunity to find out how people like each of us here on this call and in the YouTube world can get more involved with social justice movements. So depending on which time zone you're in, either this morning or this afternoon's discussion will feature a panel of exemplary community organizers who lead the organizations doing this grassroots work. We have the second in our mini-series on Thursday evening. It's going to be a different panel of organizers, and that's going to be Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. So I hope you can join us for that event too. I see that Brennan has dropped a link in the chat to our community organizing grant information. And I think he's also going to drop a link in the chat for Thursday's event. So you can sign up for Thursday's event just the way you signed up for today's event. So as you're listening to the panelists, please think of questions you have for each of them or all of them. You can type those questions into the chat at any time. So Brennan, my colleague, Brennan, can you wave your hand? I don't, there you are. The Brady Bunch, Brady Bunch pictures. So Brennan is going to be gathering the questions over the course of the event, and then we'll be turning to him to ask the questions during the Q&A period that's at the end. And because we have a short time together, my other colleague Delia, can you raise your or wave? Thank you. Delia will be keeping us on time and may occasionally interject with a time check. Okay, now on to the reason that we all have gathered here today. I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, and then they'll have an opportunity to, about 5 to 7 minutes to speak. And then at the end of that time, we'll have the question and answer period. So our first panelist is Sharon Levine with Rise St. James, which was founded in 2018. And I see Paul clapping his hands. Yes. And is located in St. James Parish, Louisiana. So Rise St. James is a faith-based organization focused on protection of the air, water, and environment. We love St. James, as did our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. And we are protecting the health and homes of residents against a massive expansion of the petrochemical industry in our backyards. So Sharon, I'm wondering if you could share a bit with us about what kind of ruckus y'all are raising down there in Louisiana.
Yes, we are trying to stop the production of a $9.4 billion industry for most of plastics from Taiwan. This industry would be 2 miles from my home. It would be 1 mile from a public school and one mile from a Baptist church. If this plant is built in St. James, we will not be able to breathe the air. We already can't drink the water, and the soil is not good either. So we already have 12 in the 5th district where I live. We already bombarded with toxic emissions in the air. We can't breathe the air for a period of time. Sometime when you go outside, the air is so bad until you can't stay out there. For example, I was outside one day this week. I went outside to talk on my phone. I had to go back in the house because the air was so bad. It was just, the smell was so bad. So the industry saw where our parish officials changed our planned use no, I'm sorry, our land use plan to future industrial. It was future residential. So in 2014, they changed it to future industrial. So these industries see our community as being open to industry. Sometimes I think they don't think they have living lives around here, like people living around here. So they come here, talk to our public officials, not to the citizens, to the public officials. And I don't know where their minds are. I don't know if it's because of the money, but they approve these industries to come in here. But they only approve them in 2 districts. We have 7 districts in St. James Parish. The 4th and the 5th district is the only district that they approve the industry to come in. These districts are predominantly African American. So they feel like they can just dump anything on us. In 2016, I found out that I had autoimmune hepatitis, and I didn't relate it to the industry until I started really working with Rise St. James. When I found out about my autoimmune hepatitis, I started to do research, and I found out that it came from industrial pollutants. And then in 2019, I found out that I have aluminum in my body. So we are fighting for our lives. It's not just for the plant not to come in, but if it come in, we will not be able to breathe the air. We will not be able to live. And I feel like they want us to be like Mossville, where they just come into your community and just take over. But as long as I have breath in my body, and as long as Rise St. James is on the rise, we will not allow them to come in here. We will not allow any more industry to come into St. James to harm our people. So we are fighting. We filed lawsuits with the Army Corps of Engineers to stop this construction. The permit that the Army Corps of Engineers filed, it was suspended. We don't know how long it will be suspended. And also we filed something in July, and the judge halted Formosa Plastics for 7 months. So they can't construct until next year. And also Formosa Plastics sent out a press release saying that they're not going to construct until after the pandemic is over with. So I don't think they're going to be able to construct at all, because with this, with the judge halting their permit, they have to go back to the drawing table to try to straighten it out. And we feel like they can't straighten it out, because God is in the makings, and God is not going to let them straighten it out where they can come and pollute us. So we need help with helping us to get the word out. We would like for people to put the word out about what's going on in St. James. We'd like people to help us by speaking up for us, telling people about what's going on in St. James. We've been doing outreach. We've been speaking to our parish officials. They are not listening to us. We wrote letters to the governor. He's not answering our letters. We did marches to go to the governor, and he won't even see us. And we also had outreach to our bishop, the Bishop of Baton Rouge, the Diocese of Baton Rouge. He came to St. James and he did a prayer service for All Saints Day on the property of Formosa. And that was so wonderful. The bishop came to help us. We have a lot of clergy that's trying to get on board, that's helping us. They wrote letters to our parish council. They're writing letters to, I think they're writing letters to the governor, and they're trying to get more clergy on board with us. And we also have grave sites on the property, and they want to uproot the graves. They want to build over the grave sites like they are nothing, but that's our ancestors. And we're trying to fight that also. We have 3 grave sites on that property. They didn't even alert the parish council who approved them to build this industry. When Rise St. James found out about it, we brought it to the parish council attention. It's a lot of things that Rise St. James is doing in St. James to bring awareness to the public and also to enlighten our parish council. We have 7 parish council members, and we have to bring information out to the public. They don't even let the public know what's going on.
1 minute.
Rise St. James is doing the work of our public officials, and we need help to get more word out to the people. We have hearings, we have town hall meetings. Since the pandemic, we can't go out to the communities and walk down the streets to tell people what's going on. So we have to do it on Facebook, and we have to have our meetings on Zoom. So we're going to continue doing what we are doing because we want to save the lives of the people in St. James. And we're hoping that we can get a moratorium on these industries that's trying to come in here. And we're trying to get the ones that are here to stop expansion. So all of this is going on right now, but Rise St. James is keeping an eye on what's going on in St. James. So I want to thank you for having me.
Yay. If we were in a room together, we would clap, of course. Thank you, Sharon, so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, please think of your questions for Sharon as we move on to our next panelists. So our next panelists are Julia Cuneo and Sam Tull with Detroit Youth Uniting Michigan, otherwise known as DAM. They are in Detroit, Michigan. They were founded in 2018 as well. And their mission statement is that DAM fights for accountability from leaders, justice for our communities, and a seat at the table for all marginalized youth. Julia and Sam, please share with us about how youth are leading the way to a better Michigan.
Thanks, Emily. So just to give a little history on DAM, our organization started after the March for Our Lives in 2018, so it's still fairly new. And the overarching sort of idea of DAM was that young people are leaders today. People kept telling young people in the March for Our Lives, you know, you're going to be the leaders one day. And we were sort of like, that doesn't make sense because we're leading right now, right? Like the young people who led the Detroit branch of the March for Our Lives, you know, made policy decisions and had an impact around the country. So there was just sort of a rejection of that framework and an insistence that young people should be the leaders today. So that's a little bit of the historical context. And then Sam, do you want to talk a little bit? Sam is, their camera it's like interrupting with their Wi-Fi. So Sam is not going to be on camera, but this is them. Hi, Sam. They are our treasurer in DAM. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit more about how you came on and what we've been doing in 2020?
Yeah, so I joined DAM in the spring around the time the pandemic started, and became a part of something DAM was involved in called the COVID-19 Youth Task Force, which provided mutual aid for kids in Michigan, basically helping them meet their basic needs during the pandemic, whether that was phone bills or buying groceries, but also giving them media and entertainment while we're all stuck at home. So that was really my first project with DAM. And then over the summer was DAM's first internship program where I was paired with another.
Sam, you broke off a little bit there. I'm not sure if people heard the part you were saying about you were paired with who? Ooh, or we might have lost your sound entirely. Okay, I'll pick up from where Sam was talking. Sam was just talking about our summer internship that we did. It was a virtual summer internship, and it was a little bit of an opportunity for us because of COVID to pair young people with an organizing group in Metro Detroit and virtually attend their meetings, virtually shadow their community organizers, and really learn about community organizing on the ground, as well as do political education meetings. That really dovetailed right into the Black Lives Matter uprisings. And so DAM had a big role in supporting young people in Metro Detroit in organizing their own marches. So there were several in Metro Detroit that were run by young people, including one that Sam helped put on in the suburbs. Since then, because school has restarted with this attempt to be completely online, DAM has really been involved in trying to set a standard for how online learning should be taking place. For example, we don't have our members here right now from Detroit because they get off of school at 3 p.m. They're on online schooling from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for 55-minute out classes with a 5-minute break, which is just an exhausting schedule that is completely unsustainable and really tied to some of the racist assumptions about Black students in Detroit and Black teachers in Detroit as well, and some of the lack of trust that our administration in Detroit Public Schools has for these students, and disregard of their health and their development, right? In the seeking of higher test scores and higher, outcomes. So that's what DAM has been doing right now. Sam, do you have your audio back yet? Are you able to talk?
Can you hear me now?
A little bit. You're cracking up a little bit. Do you want to send anything in the chat? Whatever you want to add to what we just said?
Okay. Just to add on to what you're saying.
Okay. So Sam's going to add a little bit in the chat, but just basically what is, I think, really exciting about DAM is this ability to sort of hop from issue to issue. So depending on what young people are really concerned about and being impacted by in their community, those are the things that we work on. We don't have a specific mission outside of that. We're not looking to tell young people and say, okay, young people, join our program so that we can talk about this. We're really trying to say, this is a program built for you. And so that has allowed us, especially in 2020 with the uncertainty, to really switch tracks quickly and respond to what arises for young people. When 2020 started, we had one plan, but we didn't have a lot of funding to do it. And so we were able to just sort of immediately cancel the one thing we had planned for spring of 2020 and switch to doing the COVID Youth Task Force, which Sam mentioned. And we were able to distribute about 200 care kits to young people around Metro Detroit. And that was a really big part of trying to uplift that mental health issue, because we really were seeing that young people were being multiply impacted by this pandemic in a way that maybe wasn't getting as much news coverage as other areas of intersection. So yeah, that's sort of where DAM is at right now. I think that covers it. Sam, were you going to add anything in the chat? I want to make sure you get your perspective in here.
I'm also doing my 1 minute update.
Thanks, Delia. I'm pretty much done. I just want to make sure Sam's comment gets in because they are really brilliant.
While Sam is perhaps typing, there was a question about the community organizing grants, and somebody went to the page, but there's not information about how to apply. That is because applications will open on December 1st. So check back on that website on December 1st, and the application will be there. It is an online application, and then there will be interviews for the finalists. So that is the answer to that question.
Do you guys want me to talk about this question now or later?
Oh, sure.
question.
Maybe why don't you talk about it now and give Sam a little bit more opportunity to put in their comments.
for sure. So DAM has an elected board of directors that's all high school age youth. Sam is on it as the treasurer. But they don't have necessarily a ton more authority than others. We don't have a formal voting system. DAM is really small. We're at our biggest right now with about 30-ish core members. So we usually use consensus and dialogue to figure out what we're going to be working on. That hasn't really been a controversial problem lately because it's been so clear and present, the urgent things that have needed doing. But that being said, I will say that like one of the things that happened this year that was really interesting was the COVID Youth Task Force had been planning a youth speak out on coronavirus. And this was in early summer. And then the Black Lives Matter uprising started. And basically we had a meeting and with the whole COVID Youth Task Force. And we had a conversation to say, look, this is what is the national conversation. And this is really traumatic for a lot of our Black youth members. And we need to shift. We need to start working on this. And we need to let go of the Youth Task Force. And I remember it taking like 15 minutes to decide that that was the direction we were going to go in. And I remember sitting there at the end of the meeting and being like, adults would have taken 6 weeks, right, to decide whether to shift course in that way. But when our membership came and said, this is harmful to us and we're really upset and we really need to work on this, our energy is drawn in this direction, the members who maybe like hadn't thought of that, maybe were privileged and not, that wasn't in their, where their headspace was, were like, oh yeah, of course, sure, absolutely, we'll do that. So we canceled or postponed the Youth Speak Out and went directly to that work. So I think that gives you a little bit of a peek into how we make decisions. It's really as a group. And Sam posted in the chat about virtual learning. Oh yeah, thanks, Sam. This is our current statewide campaign to try and get a online learning bill of rights to get some standard for students across Michigan. So that they gave a little bit of background on that. Thank you, Sam.
Great, thank you, Julia and Sam. So our third panelist for today is Tracy Zhao from API Equality Los Angeles, or LA, which is in Los Angeles, California. It was founded in 2005. And API Equality LA's mission is to build power in the Asian and Pacific Islander community to achieve LGBTQ equality and racial and social justice. So Tracy, if you could share with us about your organization's vision for the future and your work to get us there.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Tracy. I use she and they pronouns, based in Los Angeles, California, on unceded Tongva territory. So we were founded in 2005, which means that this is now our 15th year. And we haven't grown that much. We have a staff of 3 people and many, many volunteers, and that's always been our base. Our founding was really because in California at the time, it was pre-Proposition 8, Proposition 8 being, the case that went to the Supreme Court. But there was another proposition that was on the ballot that had gotten a lot of backlash from the mostly Asian American community about marriage. And so then San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom, now our governor, had started performing same-sex marriages in the city. And that had resulted in these huge mass protests that were organized by primarily Chinese Christian conservative church leaders, resisting the fact that trying to define marriage between a man and a woman, etc. And because for many folks, they had primarily seen their own community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community, as very politically apathetic or inactive. To suddenly see this as the moment that people were mobilizing around was really concerning. And so a lot of civil rights leaders, LGBTQ activists came together to form API Equality LA, because there are also large protests in the Los Angeles area, to really combat this idea that API communities were homophobic, and to say that actually we have queer and trans folks in our communities too, and we want the whole API community to support marriage equality. So that's really the founding story. Marriage Fight took many, many years, but after, marriage equality was won, or even during that time, the organization had expanded to focus on a lot of different intersectional issues affecting our communities, among them bullying, education, healthcare, and immigration, as well as trans rights. And so we really consider ourselves to be at the intersection of a lot of big issues, but with a really niche community. We are based in Los Angeles County. We have, I think, a different model than a lot of organizing groups in that we don't really have a geographic home. We really consider the whole county and even parts outside the county to be our base, because we can't actually really go anywhere to find our folks. There aren't really places that people gather. There might be cultural events or API ethnic enclaves, but that doesn't mean that LGBTQ folks feel safe or comfortable being there or being visible there. But then when we go to places that are more LGBTQ focused, like West Hollywood, there isn't a ton of API visibility, and then we have to deal with issues of racism within the LGBTQ community. A fun story I like to share is in the 80s, at a lot of the gay bars, they used to require 3 pieces of ID, mostly from folks of color. And for immigrants in particular, that meant, like a passport or a green card, their driver's license, and then a 3rd piece of ID. And that was really just racial profiling to prevent certain people from getting in. So those are kind of the attitudes that we're still trying to organize against today, both racism within the queer community, as well as just lack of acceptance within the API community. And how do we bring those two things together in ways that don't reinforce like xenophobic messages about immigrant communities, for example? And so our focus right now is really on the issue of mental health and wellness, as well as within the broader landscape, like healing justice and transformative justice. And so we focused a lot of our work around what is it that our members need? And a lot of our members are younger, tend to be in their teens or 20s. We recently had more volunteers who are high schoolers. And then the second thing is, how do we create spaces where people can actually meet each other and feel safe and comfortable together? So during COVID, that's really looked like a lot of online gatherings, which has been really great for some folks because traveling to our office, which is driving anywhere in LA, is kind of a bummer. So it has made it easier for people to engage with us. But it's also made it harder for some folks. For example, with the lockdown, a lot of young folks are at home in unsupportive family environments, or for some students who are in college, they've mentioned that even taking LGBTQ studies classes from home is not really realistic because they're not out, or they don't feel safe even, participating in class discussion or having the textbooks around. So we're still figuring out some of the organizing pieces, but what we've found is that particularly around May and June, during the time that all the Black uprisings were taking place across the country, we had a lot more folks getting engaged and inspired to do something, to participate, to learn about organizing and activism. So our base has been growing, and some of the things we were able to do, we've been doing just some very basic COVID support for folks. We created a phone tree as well as a resource list where we reach out to folks to offer just connection to resources or places to look for mental health support, other types of financial support. We did some protest support for actions that were going on.
1 minute.
Okay. So we trained our members as well as others on how to do safety and security at direct actions in a time of COVID. And so especially if we were going to actions led by Black trans folks, how do we show up as allies in a way that doesn't create issues for anyone else and is actually supportive? And so, and then most recently with the election, we've done a lot of turnout work, but primarily what inspired our members was a local measure, LA County's Measure J, which allocated 10% of county revenue to alternatives to incarceration. So we actually did some direct lobbying, which means we called and texted voters in LA County to support the measure, and it passed by an overwhelming majority. Folks, did general turnout work as well for the election, and we had our eye on some of the California propositions. But I think what felt so inspiring about this campaign specifically is that this measure passed in LA County, but a lot of our state propositions that we were hoping would pass failed. Like affirmative action failed, rent control failed, like a lot of the progressive ballot measures failed. And so we felt like we were able to help be a part of the coalition that was able to advance some progressive change in our county. I think just finally, like, how can folks help? What's been really hard, and I'm sure for a lot of folks during COVID, is what we really need is just like unrestricted support to figure out like what we're doing and what our folks need. That's not tied to certain deliverables other than like make sure our community is getting served. I think especially with like transformative justice and healing justice work, what's been hard is like, even with our own focus on it, and a lot more interest, I think now around transformative justice with calls to defund the police, is that what we're really looking at is how we do that internally before we do that externally. And so like, this isn't necessarily about helping us directly, but like encouraging everyone to just look at your organization culture and structures and policies and see how they might reflect like white supremacy culture or the logic of incarceration. Try not to use like big words, but so I think with our mental health work moving forward, that's still going to be our focus. We're really looking at how things like involuntary psychiatric holds, 5150s, for example, are just an extension of policing and surveillance and incarceration, and how the world that we want to live in that's really focused on community care and healing and justice wouldn't have that as part of like mental health treatment. And so, yeah, happy to talk more. We're also like taking quarterly breaks, almost like a week every quarter off, which started just as a COVID thing, but I think we're going to keep because the pace of this work for a lot of organizers is not that sustainable, and we're trying not to burn out not just our volunteers, but also our staff.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you to all the panelists. That was amazing. I always love hearing about community organizing work in all its specificity, and then also how there's so much overlap between how we all struggle together. So I wanted to just highlight one thing that I heard from both Tracy and a little bit from Julia about this idea of unrestricted funds, of general operating grants, and the community organizing grants are, for the most part, general operating grants that organizations, it's intended that organizations know how to use that money, and because of the community organizing grant was unrestricted money, DAM was able to pivot to respond to COVID, and I'm sure the rest of your organizations had a similar experience. So excited to be on the forefront of general operating grants as the rest of philanthropy suddenly discovers them during COVID. So this is a question for Sharon. And Sharon, I know that you are driving on your way to pick up your grandson, but if you're available to answer a question, I have a question for you. Can you talk about how partnering and building coalitions has helped Rise St. James with your movement work? Oh, you're on mute, Sharon.
Mute
There you go.
now. Can you hear me? All right. Well, we joined with other organizations and we call it a coalition against Death Alley. You have to have people in your circle to help you. So we formed with them and we organized and we protest and we wrote letters and we put things on live stream. We spoke up and we spoke to the parish officials. So joining with other organizations is a big help in forming this coalition, and all together we work together as one coalition and we help each other. So that was one way we did it.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm
welcome.
next going to go to Julia and Sam. So this is a question for Dan. How do you build trust during COVID with new members for consensus decision making while also accomplishing so much?
That's a really good question. I think that the COVID Youth Task Force was a really unique space because it was multiple youth organizations. There were a couple of our partner organizations on the task force. And so we had some differences in organizational culture. But the COVID Youth Task Force was this very vulnerable space. And we had weekly mental health check-ins. So young people really knew that this was a space that they could come to as not okay. We knew they weren't okay, and they didn't have to pretend, they didn't have to be on time, they didn't have to have their camera on. So it was just sort of a space to be vulnerable. And I think that really helped in that moment of sort of a time sensitive and important decision making. And I think that has come through a lot in DAM, is that if you are vulnerable with each other and you are okay with not being okay, we were able to have those kinds of conversations really, really honestly. Because I think one of the ways that white supremacy can show up in our organizing work is with this obsession with, well, we started it, we got to finish it. You know, we started saying we were going to do youth task force and a youth speak out, and that's what we have to work on now. And who cares that, you know, Black people are, you know, protesting in the street against police brutality, because we have a task force and we have to do a speak out. But because there was that space for especially Black youth to come in that space and say, like, we're not okay, and not like, no, you have to just be strong and do both things, or you're not welcome here because you're doing that, or any of those kinds of push out maneuvers that sometimes white supremacy culture can have in nonprofit spaces. That conversation happened in a way that I'm not sure that conversation would have happened in a lot of bigger and like more hierarchical organizations. I don't know if Sam wants to add to that at all, but they are still having some Wi-Fi issues, so they said they'll add things in the chat.
Yeah, Sam, feel free to add in the chat as well. I can come back to this bit later as well. So this is actually a question for everyone, but I might give Tracy the opportunity to answer first. How has the recent election, all of the elections that just happened, affected your work, if at all?
Yeah, so I don't know if others have struggled with this, but our base tends to be on the farther left side of left, where they're like, neither candidate is good. And so it's hard to get them excited about something like the presidential election when they feel like not much is going to change afterwards. I think, and so it hasn't actually been, a huge thing for us that we organize around. I think some things that are going to happen now is looking at how do we want to use electoral power, for example. So I think like for folks to feel like we can do that on a really, really local level, especially because we're such a small organization that, like mostly when we get invited by other folks to join broader coalitions, there's always this sense of like, do you just want us there because we're a queer group of color rather than making sure it's actually aligned with our own agenda? Like how much of a mutual relationship is this? And so we've really focused on finding those points of unity with folks. So with future election work, I think we'll approach it in the same way. I think we really want to sort of work within, but also push the limits of what I think nonprofits can be seen as doing. So I think a lot of groups don't do lobbying because they feel like they might be jeopardizing their status if they do too much. But I think it's like our nonprofit, like our structure is really in service of our mission. And so I think we want to be more vocal about lobbying on issues that we really do think is aligned, that we really do deeply care about, and really pointing out how that can work for us. But also saying that like having a voice on like bigger electoral issues just may not be our lane, our interest, and like what our base needs to be focused on. Yeah, I would say one last thing I would add is, during the Obama administration, one of our close partners went to protest them because of ICE detention issues, trans detention. And so I don't think that's going to change with the future administration as well. And so we see that we'll have to continue fighting for space in that way.
Great, thank you. I do see that Reggie S. Would like to get in the stack, but I wanted to give either Sharon or Julia an opportunity to answer that last question if you'd like. Or not. That's oh yeah, go ahead.
Brendan suggested that we read Sam's answer from the chat just to make sure it's on the live and the recording. Yeah, I thought it was a really good idea. So I just wanted to lift up what Sam put in the chat, which was that we held mental health Fridays that were facilitated by counselors and mental health informed adult allies. At most of our regular meetings, we also would ask how everyone is really doing to help build some trust and try to be as sustainable as possible. I love their emphasis on that sustainability, because that was really the guiding light for us in this whole year. And so I'll tie that a little bit. I mean, I think Tracy covered how we dealt with the elections too. That was basically the conversation I think we and every organization across the country was having. DAM, I love because most of our membership can't vote. So it's really easy to be like, we're not really going to engage in that because we can't vote. So to tie that back to what Sam said, like the elections just became another part of our mental health plan, right? Like checking in with each other became more of a practice of like, are you just staring at your screen watching the votes roll in? How much are you engaging with this? And how is it feeling and how are you feeling? So just really putting that as the emphasis on everything that we do, including elections.
Great, thank you, Julia. Okay, Reggie, did you have a question for us? Or for one of the panelists, rather?
Sorry about that. I was just about to unstack. No, I was just reply. I was checking out Sam's thing, and I got the answer more or less. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, I'm gonna pose a question back to Sharon. Has the attention that's being paid to the adverse effects of COVID in the African American community brought attention to your work or helped your work in any way? Oh, you're on mute again. There you go.
Well, yeah, since COVID came about, we still doing work, but we're not doing most of the leg work that we did before COVID. But COVID has affected our community because so many people have died, and we have people in our community have died from COVID, and we're hoping that once this pandemic is lifted, we'll be able to do more. We'll be more visible to our community. But we've been still bringing out the message, still doing Facebook Live and stuff like that. But we're still bringing out the message, even though COVID is out there. But we're trying to be more safe and protective of our community and the citizens in our community. So COVID has a big effect on what's going on, and we're hoping that it ends soon, so we can get back to work more visible in our community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sharon, Tracy also has a question for you. I'm wondering if you've been able to connect with other local partners working on environmental issues. In particular, I'm thinking about Vela No, an Asian American organization in New Orleans that was able to fight a landfill being built in a Vietnamese refugee community a couple of years back. Given that it's a Taiwanese corporation, I hope other Asian American organizations are lending their support in the fight.
Oh, we have connected with Taiwan. Some people in Taiwan, they are working with us to try to help us with this. And we also connected with Diane Wilson in Texas, who sued Formosa, and the settlement was a $50 million settlement. And so we are connected with those two.
Sounds like Tracy has some good leads on some other folks to connect to as well. Perhaps you could email after the event is over. Thank you.
Okay.
This is a question back to Tracy. See, can I? Yes. Can you talk a bit about how your organization decides its priorities of its work? You talked about, kind of a shift from how you were first founded to what you're working on now. So you can talk a little bit about that, and then also maybe talk about the coalitions that you work with.
Yeah, so in 2018, we did a community needs assessment for API LGBTQ folks in LA County. And we had an idea of what issues might be important, including things we'd worked on in the past, like around healthcare, trans rights, immigration, housing. We really thought one of those would be a really pressing priority for folks, just knowing, the intersections of what was going on in folks' lives. But what we actually found is that those things were all present, but that they might not be reflected in our base necessarily. And that could be because of a variety of reasons of the way that we organize, and maybe we just hadn't reached out to the right folks. But also that the main concern that people had was around social support and mental health support, that showed up in every single person's response. And that's really how we chose to work on mental health issues at multiple different levels. And so we think of it on the individual interpersonal level, like how do folks have space to heal? How do we be able to destigmatize the issue and ensure that resources are available to individuals? On the more collective organization level is how are we implementing trauma-informed practices? How do we talk about what issues around mental health are affecting our community members? And then on the more systems change level, it was what are the mental health resources available in the county? Are they LGBTQ affirming? Are they API culturally competent? The general answer to both of those questions is not really. And there's just not a lot of resources at those intersections. And so we found ourselves in a lot of rooms where it might be focused on one part of our community, but not the other. And we would get tossed back and forth. So if we're in an API group, they might be well, there's an LGBTQ group. Have you heard of them? Maybe you should go talk to them. And we're like, yes, we know them, but we also need the culturally competent resources, and vice versa. I think for our members in particular, it was hard to get them to see their issues as valid because they felt like, well, when thinking about racial justice, they know actually a lot more about Black and Brown issues than they might know about their own history and their own community issues. And so a lot of it was like, yeah, like our communities deal with intergenerational trauma, and that's something that we actually have to learn about and examine and talk about and figure out how that's affecting you, how that's affecting us and the way that we show up in our organizing work. And so, yeah, I think we do create a lot of space for volunteers to take on leadership. And so while that is like still a priority for us, we've been able to take on other projects during that time as well. And I think what's helped is that we've shifted away from thinking that if we win a policy change, it actually is going to impact any of the folks we work with, because we've really realized that that hasn't necessarily been the case, that we can't really write a policy that's API and LGBTQ specific at that level, that will always be working in coalitions. And so to that end, I think a lot of our coalitions are with like the other API LGBTQ groups in our area, which are mostly volunteer led. Some of them are finally getting their first staff, which is really exciting for us. And just like lifting up our partners, because we know there's too much work for us as one organization to do. And then there's the other queer and trans people of color groups. And so we often collaborate around programs, actions, just as well as other Asian American Pacific Islander groups. And so some of our census outreach work was partnering with an organization that we work with called EPIC, Empowering Pacific Islander Communities. And one of our most recent workshops around mental health and policing was with a partner called Vigilant Love, which works at the intersection of Japanese American and Muslim communities. And they have campaigns around surveillance right now.
Great, thank you. Well, we are at time for our event today. I'm wondering if we could just get a little round robin of a closing of one word that describes how you are feeling after hearing each other talk, and I'm interested for the audience to have an opportunity to participate in this as well. So I'm wondering, I'm gonna go just kind of in the middle of the list here. Marguerite, I'm wondering if you could just give us one word on how you're feeling right now.
I would say inspired.
Wonderful. Ain.
Connected.
Fabulous. Flip.
I'm going to steal Marguerite's. Inspired for sure.
Fabulous. Olivia. Maybe Olivia doesn't have the ability to unmute right now. Paul.
Sharon made me cry.
Yeah. Reggie.
Physically, I'm freezing. It's Connecticut and like 20 degrees outside, but mentally enthused.
Awesome. Well, I am north of you and it's 43, so I don't believe you that it's 20 degrees. Rose.
Hello, I'm just trying to unmute here. This has been amazing, just awesome. Oh, you said one word, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Everything has been amazing to hear about the work that's out there, so yes.
Thank you. I'm going to start to go to panelists now. Sam, one word. You can put it in the chat or you can unmute. Sam is inspired as well. Thank you. Sharon. I think she said amazed, but I'm not sure. Sharon, yeah, you said amazed. Ah, look at me.
Yes.
Okay, can't believe I read lips. Tracy.
I'll also say connected.
Fabulous. Brennan?
Not a panelist, but certainly uplifted. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. Delia?
Committed.
Committed. Love it. Oh, and I skipped over Julia before. Sorry about that. Julia.
Okay. I was also going to say interconnected.
Love it. Okay, well, I think that's everybody who is currently on the call. We had some more folks who had to leave early, but as I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded and broadcast on